Welcome to the InfoQ podcast, a software engineering podcast brought to you by the same team behind InfoQ.com. InfoQ.com is a software engineering news site which aims to help progressive software development teams adopt new technologies. We are also the people behind the international software conferences QCon. My name is Wesley Reisz. I'm the conference chair and community advocate for QCon. Today I'm here with Mads Torgersen. Mads is the PM leading the design of C# for Microsoft. Mads will be speaking at the upcoming QCon New York on June 13th through 15th in a track curated by Phil Hack called The Amazing Potential of an Open Source.net. Mads, we're excited you're joining us.
Well, thanks for having me.
So Mads, obviously your talk's about C#, but what's kind of the main goal for this one?
Well, C# is under pretty rapid evolution as a language, and I'm gonna focus on both C# and the technologies surrounding it, but with a strong emphasis on the language itself and how we're evolving it. And I kind of want to make sure that I talk about it in terms that you don't have to be an up-to-date C# developer already to get something out of the talk. I think with C# being available on many more platforms and in many more contexts than it used to be just a couple of years ago, and us pushing even further on that, there's a lot of people for whom all of a sudden it's an option to use C# where it wasn't before. And I want to make sure that if that's your situation, you can get something out of this talk and you can get a good feel for where C# is as a language and what kinds of innovation are going on there.
So the track at QCon and .NET tends to be kind of a new one for us. There's definitely a huge kind of volume of JVM developers that are there. What might a JVM developer pick up on by coming to your talk?
Well, ideally, of course, they would get so enamored that they would go and fire up .NET for their next project. But short of that, I think it's good to get a glimpse into a parallel world, if you will. Sure. Maybe one that has different kinds of innovation. I might be as unmodest as to say maybe more innovation in the language space, and have that inform your choices. Maybe even within the JVM world. On JVM there's more than just Java, and including languages like Scala that even we are inspired by as we evolve C#. So just open your eyes and help you know what's out there, and maybe use it as an opportunity to get better tools or become a better programmer.
Now that doesn't mean you're not going to kind of feed the C# developer soul, right?
I am certainly going to speak to the hopefully many C# developers that are in the room. I'm not just going to be there to try to capture new developers. I know that's not. People don't go to conferences to be lured over to the parallel world. I'm sure that most of the people in the room are going to be C# developers, and I'm going to make it exciting for them as well.
Awesome. So I think I've seen kind of a variation of this talk on Channel 9, but this is a completely new talk, right? There's lots of new things that C#'s working on, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, the one you've probably seen if you mention Channel 9 is the one from Future Decoded in London last fall. That one talked about C# language innovation in terms of slides. A lot has evolved both in our thinking there, and also we now have running bits for a bunch of it, so I can show live demos, and the audience will have access to prototypes. They can try things out themselves, and so it's a much more evolved vision, if you will. That's probably the main difference. And then, the fact that I'm not just talking to C# developers. I'll make sure that you can follow along as long as you understand curly braces.
Right.
In the general sense.
What are some of the bits, I guess, that you'll be jumping into in your talk?
Well, so we've been playing with a lot of different potential features for C#, and some that we are in particular coalescing around that immediately click with a lot of people when we present them are tuples. So language support for tuples that will make it absolutely smooth to have multiple return values, to have keys in hash tables that are multi-valued and just hash correctly and all that. Like all that will have a completely language integrated feel to it. So that's kind of bringing us up to par with some modern languages and functional languages in particular on that aspect.
Right.
So it seems like a small thing. I mean, there's nothing in there you couldn't do by declaring your own types or whatever, but it gives a massive simplification of your code. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, so like 3 had LINQ, 5 had async, 6 has a bunch of stuff, smaller things, but is 7 the language of tuples, or what does 7 hold?
I think that the more overall theme here is going to be features that make it easier to work with data, right? So obviously, being able to shunt little temporary groups of values around without having to declare, transport types or whatever, that's part of that. Another thing that I think is big is that increasingly in a distributed computing world, the object-oriented kind of model of the world where you have stateful objects with virtual methods on them in little hierarchies, that doesn't jibe so well with data crossing the wires, right? You'll have the same data show up in different places, and you will want to do different things with them. Yep. And so essentially, rather than having functionality on the inside like you do with objects, you kind of want to work with data structures from the outside more. And if you have hierarchies of data or whatever, you kind of want to be able to do that sort of shape-dependent behavior from the outside that you get with virtual methods. And so that's a long way of leading up to saying we want to have some form of pattern matching, where among other things, that facilitates essentially type switching. You can easily write data or control structures rather that will switch depending on the shape of your data and make that more declarative. So again, that's a thing that functional languages are it's foundational to them, and we're learning.
Yeah, I remember at QCon San Francisco last year, Lucian Wischik talked a bit about a null safety checking, a proposal for null checking on Roslyn, a diagnostic analyzer for C#. I didn't hear you mention anything like that. Is that something that's in the language or coming up in the language, or where's that stand?
Yeah, so one thing so to take a step back from that, to answer your question, one thing that we are getting better at, among other things because of our Roslyn infrastructure, our great agile compiler infrastructure that we have, is to start shipping the language on a faster cadence, honestly. Not necessarily add features at a faster cadence, though we probably will do that too, but also just have new versions out more often. Yeah. So C#7 is a short while away, and when you have more higher cadence, you can't just sort of start with a blank slate for every version of the language. You have to sort of develop features and mature them and ship them when they're ready on sort of work streams independent of the ship schedule, if you will, or more independent. And I think the nullability features that Lucian mentioned there are ones that are definitely on our radar. I want to do them. I also know that we can't finish them for C#7 because that one's coming up much sooner. So we're definitely looking at features beyond C#7. That's one that we're looking at. Another one that I'm interested in is sort of the next step of async, if you will, having language support for asynchronous streams as well as kind of single result asynchronous jobs, if you will. That would be great. Like imagine that you can have an asynchronous stream that you can asynchronously for each over and maybe produce with asynchronous iterators and stuff like that. So kind of integrating async and iterators, if you will.
Yeah. Oh, very cool.
So yeah, we have many things on the plate, and we're happy that there's more than we can eat in every setting. Now we can sort of we can work on features that may be several releases out.
I think, well, speaking of that, when I talked to Phil Hack, I think he mentioned that C#7 is the first kind of fully designed in the open version of C#, and it's being designed on GitHub, of course. How has that shifted the way you design these new features that you're looking on beyond 7, or 7 and beyond? Right.
So yeah, we started designing in the open in the middle of 6, when we were sort of half done with C#6. So yeah, he's right. C#7 is the first one where we've done it all the way, and I think it's very exciting. It gives a completely different feel to the workflow, if you will, because we get immediate feedback on things that we would have a hard time finding out whether they're right or wrong until we're close to shipping. So the course correction aspect of it is great. Like somebody will immediately point out if we're on the wrong track. Of course, a lot of people will point that out even when we don't agree, and the amount of feedback is massive, and that's sometimes a challenge to manage. But definitely not having to work in secret and not having this let's polish it all before we reveal it to the world kind of mindset is extremely liberating. It's been great.
That's got to be a big challenge though, because every misstep is out in public for everybody to critique, and especially for coming from a background where it hasn't always been a public. That's got to be an interesting experience for you.
That's true. It's a learning experience for sure. You can't be thin-skinned in this because no matter what you do, a lot of people won't like it. You have to make some hard decisions. You can't do both this and that. And that both goes for the shape of given features. People will want them differently or will want us to go further or whatever. But it also goes for which features we eventually pick up. Like everyone has their favorite feature. If we even picked up all the features that we like, let alone that the whole community likes in aggregate, we would have a language that's bigger than anyone wants to have, right? So we have to be extremely judicious and not gorge on features, if you will. Right. And that means that a lot of people are disappointed, and that's just something we have to. That's a necessary flip side, if you will, of there being more communication. They also see us make a lot of mistakes. Like we bumble about a lot more than maybe people thought. Go down a lot of dead ends, and that's it's. If anybody was in doubt before, we are extremely human, and that's on full display.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So, that's fine. We've totally gotten used to that, and it's totally worth it.
So you mentioned Roslyn a little bit ago. I probably should ask some questions there. You shipped Roslyn, so what's the latest?
Well, so Roslyn, for people listening in, Roslyn is sort of the code name for our compiler, but our compiler as an API, as a full fidelity, efficient API that underlies everything we do with the language, both compilation and tools. Okay, so it's a very advanced but easy to use kind of framework. And one thing it does is it's completely open source as well. And so it lets us evolve in many directions in a much more agile fashion than we've been able to before. Anything that's language-based, anything that deals with code, produces or consumes code, can be built very easily from Roslyn components. And so a bunch of people are doing that now that Roslyn is out in the open, and we are too. So we're deeply involved in the what's called the Omnisharp effort to use Roslyn to facilitate great editing of C# in other editors, including VS Code, which is where the C# extension to VS Code is evolving rapidly. We're putting a lot of effort into that. We are building more and more editing features, new refactorings, and more intelligent, tolerant tools at the sort of editing level of your code all the time now because of that. And shipping those in updates and in the next version of Visual Studio that we're working on and so on. So we're essentially capitalizing on the effort now. We are also evolving Roslyn itself in various ways. Of course, both to accommodate the new language features that we're adding, but also giving it more capabilities as an API that, again, let ourselves and others build awesome tooling and all kinds of awesome analysis and so on top of it.
So when you say give it more capabilities of an API, can you give us a glimpse of what the future holds for a developer that's using Roslyn?
As an example, we've been exposing full fidelity syntax trees. You can go concrete syntax trees. We also have what you could call semantic trees internally in the Roslyn infrastructure, but they haven't been exposed as a data structure. So essentially, a semantic tree is one that has all the binding information. What do all the symbols mean, and so on. So far, this semantic information has sort of been exposed in terms of specific questions you could ask the compiler, but the underlying data structure was hidden, and we're exposing that now. So that's an example of where people can spelunk more detailed information about code.
Cool. So I want to loop back to the QCon New York talk just for a second. So what type of things for someone coming to your talk do you want them to walk away with? What actionable things will they gain from coming to your talk?
Well, hopefully they'll get excited.
Yep.
Hopefully people will sort of get an updated view if they need it of what the scope of C# is, C# and .NET. What's the status of the language innovation compared to the modern language landscape in general, and where can you use C# where you might have thought you couldn't, right? So if somebody goes away, if somebody's already a C# developer, they should just go away and download the prototypes that we will have available at the time and play with the new features and give us feedback. And if you're not already a C# developer, go try it out. It's on a platform near you. Make a little project and see, what it feels like to be in that world. Try C# or another .NET language like F#, and compare.
So I teach a class here at the University of Louisville, and I part of it is in .NET, and so I actually got to do some work with .NET inside Sublime, and it was a lot of fun with to be able to do it from a Mac. For my class. So yeah, it's pretty cool to, I'm a long-time Java developer, definitely a .NET developer, but it was nice not to be in a VM to be able to start showing it for class. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so last question. This question has literally nothing to do with your talk, but it's one that I find really interesting to kind of pick the minds of all these brilliant people that come to QCon. So what is it that you feel is the most disruptive tech right now in IT?
Okay, so it's got to be a tie between two things here. And there will be two things that a lot of other people will probably mention. I don't have like a genius answer different from everybody else's. Like one thing is the Internet of Things is just beginning. Okay, so there's going to be software everywhere. Like we software developers, we have it made because the distribution, the sort of consumer level distributed computing that started with the smartphones, really, that's just going to go to the nth degree for a very large N. And it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out and how that disrupts existing technologies. Like, are we just going to get our usual programming languages and technologies on smaller and smaller things? This is going to disrupt us. This is going to have ripples of effect somehow. So that's one that I think we're all watching. I think another one that has gotten a lot of press, not all positive, lately is artificial intelligence. Like it's been laughed at a lot lately with the bots going amok. But I actually think that we're at a point, and we'll realize that soon as a community, where we really now understand what artificial intelligence is. I think there's been sort of this popular culture pipe dream of artificial intelligence being about computers figuring out how everything should be done, like programming becoming obsolete and computers just doing what in their immense intelligence they feel is right? And I don't think, that's not coming to pass as I see it. I think that we're understanding that at least for the time being, artificial intelligence, first of all, it's starting to really work. It's starting to be advanced enough that you can ask a complicated question and get the right answer, or you can really set up artificial intelligence things that are smart, but they are a service, right? Artificial intelligence is a service. It comes out in specific ways like speech recognition or risk assessment or things like that. But it's a service, and we as programmers, we can still look at it as method calls that just do more fancy things. Right? Yeah. Essentially, it hasn't disrupted the way we program the way we thought we would. We just have really good services to call into.
Very nice.
Better. So those are my two, tight disruptive technologies, right?
Sounds awesome. Well, Mads, thank you for chatting with us today. If you like what you heard, Mads will be speaking at QCon New York on June 13th through 15th, and his talk will be on C# today and tomorrow. Thank you, Mads.
Thanks for having me.